While high-level policymakers meet in Stockholm with the intention to further progress towards our carbon emissions ambitions, the war in Ukraine rages on. Irina Stavchuk, the Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, shares with us the devastation that the war in Ukraine has taken on not the people, but the environment more broadly. Let's watch.
Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Russian military has fired more than 2,000 missiles into Ukraine. Around 85,000 tons of destroyed Russian military equipment is laying in sites and countryside. According to the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, about 300,000 square kilometers of Ukraine's territory need demining, including explosives installed by Russian troops in forests and on vast areas of arable land in Ukraine, which as a result cannot be used for agriculture. Dozens of Ukrainian nature reserves and national parks have suffered significant damage, such as the destruction of Ramsar sites at the coast of the Azov and Black Seas and in the lower reaches of the Danube and the Dnipro rivers. The Russian military has caused significant damage to water supply, sewerage, and communication systems, directly threatening fresh water supplies. UNICEF in Ukraine estimates that up to 6 million people now have no regular access to drinking water. Russians are targeting infrastructure and industrial sites, explosions releasing tons of poisonous chemicals. They are putting oil processing plants on fire that is extremely hard to quench. From the very beginning, the war put the world on the brink of a nuclear disaster. Russian army started off by occupying Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They kept hostage the employees and didn't allow the rotation, damaged the power supply system, which is critical to safety of operations, damaged monitoring and research equipment. They built fortifications and burned grass and bushes in highly contaminated red forest. While leaving, the occupiers stole and damaged 133 radiation sources, which are highly dangerous if handled unprofessionally. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is still controlled by the Russian military. This war needs to be stopped as soon as possible, before its cost is too high for the whole humanity.
Joining me on stage is Johnny Dabrowski, an Earthday youth ambassador and Fridays for Future activist. Please come up on stage, Johnny. We will also welcome back Ingmar Rentzhog, CEO and founder for We Don't Have Time, who needs no introduction at this stage, and Nick Nuttall, who is one of my co-hosts, of course, and has also previously worked with Earthday. So, please join me on stage.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to pose this question first to Ingmar and Nick, because this was a joint effort between We Don't Have Time and Earthday to really bring the impacts of the Ukrainian war on the environment to light. Why is it so important for us to highlight the impacts of this war? Ingmar, let's start with you.
Because we don't have time for war, and war is doing two very, very bad things besides the human tragedy, and that is it's delaying the transition to a fossil-free society. We don't have time for war, and the other thing, that is we're destroying nature when we need to do everything we can in order to protect nature, and it's stupid with war. I mean, we're living on the same ship. We can't fight each other and destroy the ship. We need to repair the ship instead.
We definitely don't have time for war. And the impacts to the environment are devastating. Talk to us a little bit about this, Nick.
Well, I think, obviously in times of war, our first response must be for the people who are suffering. And it's absolutely clear we need medical help there, we need food and lots of other things, clothing, particularly when it's cold. We need to care about the people right now, but after this conflict is over, there's going to be a huge environmental legacy in the Ukraine. And if you are going to recover that country so that it's fully livable in for its citizens, then we need to address the environmental impacts of this war. I understand that the Ukrainians have already requested support from the United Nations Environment Programme, who have a post-conflict assessment unit. They've covered many, many wars across the globe, including in Iraq and in Syria and other places, and Lebanon. And they will come in, hopefully, when the time is right, to do a full assessment of what exactly has happened and make recommendations how to recover that environment. It's going to be polluted water, right? It's going to be toxic chemicals in lakes and river systems. It's going to be other issues. What exactly happened at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant? Is it really a risk or not? Yes or no? We need the yes and no answers afterwards, and then we need a full recovery package for the people, for the environment of their nation.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. So we would not be in this situation had we not been supporting the war machine that is oil and gas. And if we move to a clean energy future, we could potentially be ushering in a more secure future as well. Johnny, let me turn to you. How do you think about energy and security?
Well, I think they are inseparable. Every country needs energy, every country needs food, and it's not a new case, it's always been like that. Nowadays, the biggest economies of the world are built on a lot of energy. And I think that a country which cannot supply energy for its own is not fully independent. And this is what we can see right now very well. And we were talking about the war in Ukraine. I think it's a really good example where you can see how oil and gas rules the situation, but also how we can reverse it and how energy impacts policy. For example, right now, a few days ago in Brussels, we had an incomplete embargo. Incomplete, I want to mark that. Incomplete embargo on oil and gas. And the important thing I think we all should see is that if Europe puts full embargo on oil and gas from Russia, and if hopefully Ukraine wins the war with Russia, we will have an unprecedented opportunity to finally conduct energy transformation in Europe. I mean, to the renewables. Because finally we'll cut off energy from Russia, which was extremely hard to do before. And I hope we use this opportunity in the relation between policy and energy.
Yeah, you're making a good point. You're thinking ahead, and it's incredible to have young people involved in this fight. And we are in the midst of it, so it's hard to think that there is an end in sight, but there will be. We will come out of this. How do we come out of this and ensure that clean energy security is really going to be at the core of the recovery effort post this war? How do we make sure this transition is really equitable for the people? As Johnny's been saying, there's an opportunity here too. It sounds almost insensitive to say that, but as we look ahead and we think through how we work together collectively to bring in a more equitable, clean future for the people of Ukraine. How do you think about that, Ingmar?
I think our leaders are stupid, and they try to get off this easy. And I'm not talking about the war, because we need to get off oil and gas, no matter war. It's just now we see it's totally crazy to give money to a country that are in war with us. But what we need to do is to get rid of all fossil fuel dependency. We need to stop natural gas. Instead, we consume more. We're building more pipelines, and they are still active today. We are consuming more fossil fuel energy, and natural gas is not a renewable energy, and we should not use it, even if it's not coming from Russia. We should stop using it. And the only way we can succeed with this transition is to consume less energy. No political leader talks about that we need to consume less energy. It will never be enough to just go green, because we don't have time. And we need to use all fossil fuel alternatives in the toolbox. We don't have time to don't use everything we have that is something else than just fossil fuels. And that is not what has happened in Europe. Instead, we're continuing increasing the energy consumption, and we're not doing it in the right way. And even if the war is gone, I think we're not going to do it if we don't realize that we need to consume less energy and transform the whole energy system.
Consume less, and then the mix that we're consuming from needs to not be fossil fuels.
When it was World War II, we didn't buy oil from Germany. We stopped using oil. We started to power our cars with alternative energy. We need to, and we rationalize things. We eat less food. We saved what we had. That was how we were handling that crisis. And this is exactly how we need to handle the crisis now with war, but also with the crisis, with the climate crisis.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah,
Nick, please.
I mean, we're fortunate, right, at this moment in time that we do have, solar and wind and other renewable technologies now, really low in terms of their costs, right? So this is a golden opportunity to not just exponentially increase our green energy in Europe and elsewhere in the world, but to also actually go exponential. In other words, we've got the climate crisis behind all this, right? We've got 3 years to reduce our emissions, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We've got, less than 10 years to actually halve our emissions by 2030 to give us a running chance of net zero and achieving the Paris Agreement by 2050. So the war has come as a shock, but it has to be a shock that we can use to actually, and you see it actually. I mean, you are starting to see in Europe headline news in quite a lot of newspapers about governments doing things that are into the green energy space, and we need to actually push on this much harder. But, we've got another issue here as well, which is, okay, it seems impossible to imagine doing anything constructive right now with the current regime, the current head of state of Russia. But there will come a time when the war's over, as you said, and we are not going to fight climate change around this world by isolating Russia in terms of climate action. They need to be part of the solution as well, and their people need to be part of the solution. So we have to find, either within the European Union or at the level of the United Nations or whoever it's going to be, to actually see how we can work with Russia post this conflict to bring them on track. And there are lots of opportunities. Russia could be a provider of hydrogen, for example. This would give them a perspective for their economy and be part of the new green energy transition. And I think you've even got some other interesting numbers here as well, Ingmar.
I mean, we have a problem because we're going to have losers in the transition, and they are resisting. And in order to lower that resistance, we need to help them. We can't say that they are our enemies and think that that will solve things. So it's absolutely right. We need to help everyone in the transition, even those we don't like. And I don't like oil companies, but I have a solution for all the oil companies out there and oil countries as well. And that is, they are really good at drilling for energy. They're drilling for oil. They have a lot of skills in doing this.
Right.
They have a lot of skilled workforce doing the drilling. And there exists one renewable energy that you can drill for, and that's geothermal. And here's an interesting fact. Russia has more geothermal energy than the whole oil reserve. So what are they waiting for?
Right.
Instead of going to war, try to sell their oil with higher prices, they could just switch to geothermal instead.
Yeah.
So there's opportunity for Ukraine, there's opportunity for Russia, there's even opportunity for oil and gas to really transition, to repurpose the skills that Go ahead.
Yes, there's a lot of opportunities here, but here is the thing. It will hurt at the start when you're doing the change. We need to save energy now so that we can consume more energy tomorrow. We need to do investment today so we don't make profit today, but we do more profit tomorrow. And this is the leadership of the world is failing. They don't want to do anything that hurt them today because they think they get out of their job. Doesn't matter if they have the job left. They just need to do the job in order to have a future.
Yeah, exactly. We need to make that loud and clear, and the youth can actually really get the attention of some of these leaders. So how do we get more youth involved? How do we actually mobilize the masses, as you've been doing, in a way that this message that has been very clear and concise reaches the ears of those who are currently in decision-making positions?
I think the youth is very clear on that and has always been. We just don't accept it, we don't compromise it. And I think youth has always, since the Fridays for Future has merged 3 years ago, shown who is guilty. We always said Total, we always said Shell, we always said Putin. We're never scared to do that. And so I think that we are now on the eyes of the world because we're the world's future. And we are driving this because we've been always clear about it. And I think that what you've mentioned, for example, the geothermal energy in Russia, we need to be clear about it, as the youth has been clear about who is guilty here. But I think that what everyone can do, my age, of course, everyone can do something different. You can join a movement, you can create a movement, you can join your company. But I think the first thing each one of us must do is not to accept the status quo. Yeah. And I assure you we don't. But if we don't look at the facts seriously, even facing it would not be enough.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you, gentlemen. We are out of time, but this was a fantastic beginning to a segment where we will talk about the transition to clean energy and how that will usher in an energy secure future for Ukraine, for Russia, for all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sweta.
I was in Davos last week, and the war in Ukraine and the role of oil and gas in fueling Putin's war machine was front and center. The real estate normally dedicated as Russia House on the promenade had been turned into the Russia War Crimes House. The view on Russia at the gathering was that we must relinquish our reliance on oil and gas, and this oil and gas is holding the world hostage because we have not yet been able to usher in clean energy at scale. So how do we achieve energy security? How do humans live energy-rich lives? I asked these questions while in Davos to Daniel Aegerter, chair of Armada Investment AG. Daniel is a serial entrepreneur and VC with deep understanding on how investing in energy solutions can aid in overcoming the climate crisis. Let's watch. So as promised, I am here with Daniel Aegerter, who is the CEO and chairman of Armada Capital. We are here in Davos. You can see the proof of that with Daniel's background. And we are so excited to have this conversation, especially at this key moment in time at STHLM+50, which really finds itself between COP26 and COP27. So I'd like to kick it off to you, Daniel, with our first question, which is looking at the big picture. Where are we with energy now? There's all these ambitions for companies and governments to reach net zero. And that means in a lot of cases that we are encouraging less consumption of energy. Is that how you see it? How do we actually reach our ambitions, but still have these energy-rich lives?
Exactly. I think that's super important. I think there are so many people on this planet who deserve to have access to energy-rich lives that do not have that today. And, we can tell people in India, you're not allowed to buy a washing machine because, we don't have the CO2 budget for that. So that is a clear issue that we need to figure out how to really solve that. And which basically means we need clean energy and we need plentiful of clean energy. Which basically means we have to start turning off the worst, which is coal, and then move on to the most sustainable and most clean source of energy and scale all those that can be scaled, and especially scale those sources of energy that give us baseload and that give us a reliable baseload supply 24/7, 365, and do not emit CO2. And in order to do that, we need to rethink some things. We need to rethink some long-held beliefs and be willing to be open up to allow all technologies to contribute to solving our joint problems here.
So talk us through what those energy sources are. What is the ideal mix of clean energy that will allow us to have that baseload and also ensure that we have global stability? Because a lot of our usage and reliance on fossil fuel is also resulting in some of the grievances that we're seeing around the world, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Exactly. So what is the right energy mix? And obviously that depends on each country. And some countries have a lot of wind, some countries have a lot of hydro. Clearly, if you can scale hydro, that is ideal. But in general, I believe that we need to have two main pillars that provide baseload, one of which is carbon neutral and one of which has some level of emissions, ideally gas still, and two that are CO2 neutral but have some intermittency, so maybe wind and solar. But the most important pillar that I believe that is the most scalable, and historically we have failed to execute on that opportunity, remains nuclear. And you look at what France is doing and how they're now back to scaling their local energy industry. And I think Macron puts it very, very well. A, it gives us price stability. B, it gives us reliability of supply. C, it is CO2 neutral. 4, it gives us a domestic industry that provides high-paying jobs. And 5, it is actually still reliable, cheap electricity. And I think when people say, oh yeah, but it's not that cheap, it's not as cheap as solar, I think we have a huge fallacy that we compare apples and oranges when we compare the price of baseload to an intermittent source. And I think we just need to shy away from that. Both have a role to play, but clearly we cannot do it without baseload.
So what is it that Armada Capital is doing to see that come into reality? Because there are some real challenges in ensuring that we have that baseload and that we're able to transition fully to a clean energy future. What role is it that Armada is playing and that you would like to continue to do to see all of our ambitions truly realized in the coming months and years?
So one thing I'm doing is the public awareness and working with people who are advocating, to have a more inclusive and less discriminatory approach against nuclear as being part of the solution. And the second thing I'm doing is working what I always do is work with entrepreneurs to help build companies that can potentially change the world. And I believe that the only way we're going to solve climate change is through entrepreneurship and innovation and backing entrepreneurs that really can solve problems that we haven't been able to solve for a long time. And in that area, one of them would be take the bit of Oklo that is working on small microreactors, or Brett Kugelmass of Last Energy is also working on small reactors that are based on pretty much off-the-shelf components, or also Commonwealth Fusion Systems that is working on a revolutionary fusion tokamak reactor.
You have been a successful entrepreneur yourself. You are now supporting entrepreneurship to really drive the capital in a direction that is going to support our ambitions to reaching net zero. And what is your hope then for the future? Are you seeing your efforts realized? And what do you think the timeline will be for us to really veer off this fossil fuel dependency that we're on?
So that is actually a little bit depressive, because if you really look at the reliance of fossil fuels in the global energy mix, it remains persistently at 80%. And we've seen major economies like India actually even increase the level of fossil fuels over the last 25, 30 years. However, that is also positive because they have also an energy transition actually away from burning wood. So to a certain extent, fossil fuels have supplanted wood, which is something that happened in other countries, at the beginning of the industrial age. But the challenge that we have is we got to figure out how to get the 80% fossil fuel share down to 70, 60, 50. And of course, we got to get first rid of the coal then we got to get rid of the oil, and then we got to get rid of the gas, because that's the order of emissions intensity that they have for the electricity and energy they produce. So we need to get away from fossils, we need to reduce fossils, and we need to scale clean energy sources, electricity, electrify everything. That, I believe, is a multi-decade plan. I don't believe panic is going to get us there. I believe planning is going to get us there. And the other thing that I think is important, government, I think, wants to take a very active role in facilitating this transition. And sometimes the most important role that government can take in facilitating these kinds of innovations, I'm afraid to say, is to get out of the way and not to over-regulate a nascent industry. Now, of course, you think about nuclear reactors, how these things take too long to build. And you got to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. Did we build these things in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in 4 or 5 years? Why is it now taking 15? I thought it's an emergency. Why can't we do it in 3? Why can't we really mass manufacture them like we manufacture, 747s and big aircrafts, and produce them by the hundreds and live in a 4,000 reactor world that really is going to allow for nuclear to be 20-30% of the global energy mix. That, I believe, is possible. And I believe it is both fusion and fission that offer those opportunities, but it requires several decades to get there. It requires both government support as well as government understanding that sometimes we need to let the entrepreneurs that have the ability to come up with new solutions, we need to let those animal spirits flow.
I love that. We hear that loud and clear, right? We were able to come up with a vaccine for COVID-19 in record time and distribute it globally. That was more of the challenge than anything else. So we can do it. We're capable. We have the human ingenuity. We just need to get that collaboration, that public-private partnership going so that it really sees its fullest potential, because we don't have time. And so we can't, ignore the fact that we're in Davos right now, and this is playing at STHLM+50. And what do you think will be the takeaway in terms of collaboration across private sector and money managers, and just being able to really bring in the private sector network to really energize and get behind some of these innovations and see them to commercial viability? If the governments, let's say, get out of the way, can we still get collaboration across private sector and those who move money and really see the prioritization of some of these innovations? So we can actually usher in this clean energy future.
Yeah. We clearly can't do it without government, can't do it without private enterprise. We really got to come together, and everybody has to really think about what role they can play. And we have to do that in a constructive partnership oriented way. But ultimately, we also have to find a way to make sure that the market forces work and that it makes sense, that it is affordable, that consumers have reliable electricity at reasonable price levels. And what are reasonable price levels? I think we need to be around 10 cents per kilowatt hour clean for base load, with some level of intermittency. And I think that's a very, very sustainable level that I think we can really have industry and consumers live energy-rich lives. I also, see that now when we have gas prices spiking the way they have been. These numbers are completely going up by orders of magnitude, and that I think is the issue. We need to have some level of reliability on the price, and you look at the price in France, and it is clearly more stable than it has been in other countries. It has also had more volatility than would be inherent based on their production, due to the fact on how the mechanisms are working with exchanging with Germany and the intermittency that need to be dealt with. But fundamentally, I mean, in Switzerland with hydro and nuclear, we've had a lot of great price stability in our energy supply. actually some companies that are in the paper recycling business now produce cheaper in Switzerland than in Germany, which is something we would have never thought is possible. Switzerland always being such a high-wage country. And so the point being, a reliable, clean, cheap electricity mix makes your country highly competitive and creates prosperity for your people.
Well, with you and some of your colleagues and peers that are speaking on these issues and more at Davos, I hope that we can see some of these conversations really turn into reality, and sooner than later, because we need to urgently act on climate. We don't have time. Thank you for all that you do and what you contribute to solving the climate crisis, because together we really are the solution. Thank you for your time, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to speak with you.
Appreciate it. I'm pleased to introduce our next panel. Joining me on stage is Seth Grae, who leads Lightbridge Corp., which is working to develop and deploy advanced nuclear reactor fuel that will result in more electricity being provided from existing and new reactors to allow nuclear power to compete and grow internationally as a non-emitting source of baseload electricity. On Lightbridge's board is Professorial Lecturer of Johns Hopkins University and President Emeritus of the Center for International Environmental Law, Dan Magraw. He is an international lawyer with expertise in environmental protection, climate change, and human rights. Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. We also have with us Åsa Pettersson, the CEO of Swedenergy, a non-for-profit industry and special interest organization for companies that supply, distribute, sell, and store energy. Åsa has previously worked as the head of sustainability for Vattenfall and Scania. Finally joining us via Zoom is Nataliya Katser Buchkovska, former member of parliament of Ukraine from 2014 to 2019. What a fantastic panel we have here. Okay, so Seth, I'm going to start with you. We've been hearing that we need to transition to clean, green energy for global security. We've been hearing what that would look like, and we just heard from Daniel the role that nuclear needs to play in that as well. Talk to us from your vantage point, the role of nuclear in supporting a stable global economy.
Well, as Daniel Aegerter was saying, I think it's essential. It's something that's been proven for decades. It's something that can be deployed, run at all times of day. The current nuclear power plants are very large. They operate 24/7. They tend to be, as Daniel said, very expensive, take years to deploy. And we're moving now toward these smaller modular reactors that are being designed to be built in factories or shipyards and deployed in large numbers in many more countries and more affordable, more easily financed. So I do think that as we're moving to having these smaller, cheaper reactors, nuclear will continue to play a role in 24/7 power, and also with new technologies, reactors with advanced fuels that will be able to go up and down in power, balancing renewables as the sun shines and the wind blows.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Also, when we think about Sweden and the exports from Sweden, we think about cars, paper, iron, steel. But fossil fuel-free electricity is also an export from Sweden. So now with the EU trying to move away from Russian energy, the need for this electricity is even greater. So how can Sweden help to meet this need and help the EU achieve better energy security overall?
Thank you very much. Very relevant question. Yeah, Sweden has today in the electricity mix around 98–99% fossil-free electricity. So indeed, that's a very good starting point. And as you say, I mean, we're an integrated electricity market. There is a potential to export this, but there is, of course, an even greater potential to use this electricity to make fossil-free products and export the products. So, I mean, Sweden, we're standing just as the rest of the world in the midst of this transition, and there are a lot of projects projects. For example, we are very far ahead in looking into producing fossil-free steel with electricity and hydrogen as the base. So, I mean, using electricity to produce clean hydrogen and then producing fossil-fuel steel would make an even greater value out of this export of the electricity. But of course, to achieve that, we need to, as a country, double the electricity consumption compared to what we have today. So we need to build another energy system, the same as the one we have today, to achieve this. And that electricity needs to be fossil-free, renewable.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is this taxonomy has to really include clean energy sources, nuclear, hydrogen. And Nataliya, this is something you have been working on even before the war. You were supporting a clean energy future for Ukraine. And you're thinking ahead. You're thinking to the end of the war, and you're thinking how Ukraine is going to transition to clean energy. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and why it's so important to think ahead through the devastation that's occurring right now to a brighter, cleaner future for Ukraine.
Good evening for everyone. Thank you, Shada, for this question. For sure, we should think ahead. And well, first of all, Ukraine is the center of Europe, and we have a very sophisticated energy system, which is like 30% coal, 57% nuclear. We have gas and only 12% of renewables. So after war will end, for sure, we need to think, and we have the chance to, first of all, redesign the energy system. Now Ukraine under serious attack, and a lot of our energy system are destroyed. So at the first time, we have a serious shock and need to substitute energy on different means, generation on different means, as well as in Europe. They are also working on the redirection of energy flows, gas, even someone used coal as a supplement generation. Just in short term. In middle term, we have a chance to redesign the whole electricity system, including Ukraine, and make it more sustainable. Because, yes, from the one side, we can say we can, now everyone is working to stop transiting Russian gas and oil. But from the other side, there is a movement towards increasing the oil production. And today, European countries said that they will be increasing it by 15%. So future is unpredictable. We don't know for sure what would be the design. And now, after I left parliament, I set up a Ukrainian Green Infrastructure Fund, which Ukrainian Sustainable Fund, which should design this new system. And we are working to attract funds and investment to green transition after post-war, in course of post-war recovery. So first of all, we need to think now in advance to set up the correct system and the right frame to rebuild Ukraine in more sustainable green way. Well, now it's the right time because like we have time, we have to think and then when there will be rebuilding of Ukraine, we can implement all this strategy. So why don't we think about now and like use this opportunity also to start something green and new and to rebuild Ukraine in a sustainable way.
Incredible. And Nataliya, you've been a politician, you've been in a position of decision-making, and we're talking about something very close to your heart, your own country. And so thank you for sharing that with us, and we're coming back to you to hear more about your experiences in Ukraine as well. But let me turn to you, Dan. So as a lawyer, talk to us, and somebody who's worked in human rights, talk to us about the relationship between human rights abuses and dirty energy, fossil fuels, and why is it more critical than ever? Here is case in point, what we're currently seeing in Ukraine.
Well, dirty energy affects human rights in many, many ways. For the audience, a basic starting point is that environmental harm impacts human rights, and if you think about it, it's pretty obvious, but it took us a while to get here. But it affects the right to life. If you're poisoned, it affects the right to property, the right to own and use culture or enjoy culture. So that's a starting point. If we look at what dirty energy does, one thing it does is just the ambient pollution from dirty energy affects people's health and their livelihood and their lives. If we look at climate change, there are several impacts of dirty energy on climate change. One is it affects the enjoyment of things like the right to enjoy culture. The Inuit can't hunt the way they used to before. Again, for this audience, I don't need to explain the different risks that climate change is raising, but if we look at right here in this part of the world, the tree line is moving north at about 130 feet per year. That's not a marginal change. It's a massive change. That's going to destroy the culture of the Sami. And that's an example of how human rights impact, or excuse me, climate change impacts human rights. It also affects migration, of course, because people are going to be moving internally as displaced persons and across borders. And that can cause tremendous havoc for the countries in which they move, but the people that are moving are also, their human rights are being affected as well. And you know, we've seen the kind of disruption that can come from overdependence on dirty fuels as well that Nataliya just described and the previous speakers. The final point I'd make is some of the remedies that are being suggested now are extremely dangerous in themselves. One is to spread a level of aerosols around the world to reflect more sunlight back into space. We don't know anything about that, really. Sweden was involved in some experiments. They've stopped now, I think. But that kind of idea is extremely dangerous and could easily affect the production of food around the world, especially for small holders, and then impact the right to food. So that's just an example.
Wow, thank you. No, great information. We need to make sure that we are able to put these innovations, not the ones that are dangerous, but the ones that have a lot of promise. We need to make sure that they reach commercial viability. But some technologies don't even get there because of public perceptions and pushback. And there's these perceptions around nuclear safety and proliferation that you contend with on a regular basis, Seth. So what is Lightbridge and the wider sector doing to address this, and what can nuclear's role actually be in clean electricity?
Well, nuclear safety and proliferation are a major focus of the nuclear power industry and every company in it. What we are doing now, in addition to better regulation, better operation of the plants, is non-proliferation and safety by design. So at Lightbridge, in our advanced nuclear technology, we are significantly advancing the safety and non-proliferation and other benefits of the technology itself. So it's like, in addition to speed limits for cars, have airbags, have technology that has the safety. And as we've heard said throughout the day, we just don't have time to replace fossil fuels with something that we don't know if it will work. We don't have time to wait for carbon capture from the atmosphere or from smokestacks economically, globally, so that we can continue to use fossil fuels. We don't have time for battery backup of cities to power Beijing at night or season to season from renewables. We do have time to massively produce much more nuclear power in these smaller, more quickly deployed units. Lightbridge is developing the fuel that will power them more efficiently with enhanced non-proliferation, with enhanced safety. And we're trying to be the answer that says, yes, we do have time to do this and to deploy it on a massive scale.
Thank you for sharing that, Seth. So we really need to move our dependence, and we don't have time. We have to remove our dependence from fossil fuels, and we need to bring new technologies in the pipeline, but really deploy what we already have now. And Nataliya, you know this better than anyone. You had a harrowing experience fleeing Ukraine, following the Russian aggression. Talk to us a little bit about your experience and why it's more important than ever to remove our dependence from fossil fuels so no sovereign country has to go through what you went through.
Well, it's a very good question. So, you know, that now we face, as Ukrainians, we face this tremendous challenge. We are going through the active phase of hybrid war. It's not just physical invasion of our country, but the Russian troops. Russia also used different means like energy and gas. It always was a political tool to press and to manipulate by others. States, but now it's a weapon. It's a hybrid weapon in hybrid warfare. So why before I've been in Parliament, I argued that Nord Stream 2 overdependence of Europe from Russia's fossil fuels would have a far-reaching consequences. Now, finally, people understand that, yes, we need to move from this fossil dictatorship, and this country misuse the dominance position. And first of all, it's about influence over the decision, and now we have the consequences that this country invade independent state in the center of Europe. So now Europe faced with the very urgent shock and trying to redesign the energy system, gas flows. It's not possible just to jump from fossil fuels to renewables in one day or even year. But now it's a very critical time when we have a chance to redesign, because it could be different ways. Not only we are thinking we'll switch from Russian gas and oil, and it would be renewables and green energy. It could be even more dependence on fossil fuels, because some countries start using coal and they back to coal just to cover this deficit in electricity and energy production to lower the price. And here, as we are speaking with the audience who actually devoted to sustainability and green transition, I suppose we should be very loud to switch policy 100% towards sustainable paths, because it could be very different scenarios. So in middle term, as I said, there is a chance to make a new design. And in long term, I suppose the war in Ukraine would be like a turning point towards sustainability, and it could even accelerate the transition. So from my experience, I've been a member of parliament for 5 years. We have 0 renewables in our system, and now we have 12% of renewables in our system, which is quite complicated for countries who could not afford very high prices for electricity, but we still did it. Ukraine has tremendous chances and has a big potential. Very big potential and resources for, first of all, to produce green hydrogen, solar, wind, as well as other alternative fuels. For Europe, for themselves, we could be totally independent from fossil fuels. If now, for instance, international organization will focus and help us to create this new design. And after, as I said, we will end it. It's a very critical to redirect all recovery funds, which would Ukraine receive from different countries, towards renewables, not other ways. And it's not only energy, it's other in agriculture, infrastructure, also other different energy efficiency building, which would be rebuilt from the scratch city. We have a chance to redesign it. So this is the key message. So let's think now, and let's not allow to use this crisis back to fossil fuels, to more dependence, but let's use this chance to create create the ground to much more quicker and efficient transition.
Yes, let's see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and how we can really usher in a future that is clean, it's more equitable, and it has the support of the Ukrainian people, and let that be an example that can be scaled, that can be applied to other countries as well. And thank you, Nataliya. Stay safe, stay on with us. I will move to Asa. So Sweden is, of course, a member of the EU, and we've recently had in the EU a debate on the new taxonomy. What are your thoughts on this taxonomy, and should nuclear energy be labeled as sustainable?
No, yeah, but I think, like Nataliya is saying, we really need to grab this opportunity of redesign and getting out of this dependence on fossil fuel. Nuclear is one part of this solution. If you look at the Swedish energy system today, we are 30% electricity production, around that from nuclear power. But there is no silver bullet. We need to use all available sources for electricity production. The taxonomy is an important tool because it guides the financial sector into what is a good and sustainable investment. So I think it's important then to be able to include all fossil-free solutions into, I mean, nuclear power is not renewable, but it is fossil-free, and we need to move away from the carbon dependence. So including nuclear power in the taxonomy is an important step, not to exclude it. At the same time, nuclear power is not a quick fix either. I mean, so we need to focus on what's the most fast available production source today is wind power. I mean, that's what is being built. Wind is the only power source that has been built in Sweden during the past years, and the only source that is being built right now. And so we need to enable the build out of wind power. We need to not put up obstacles for nuclear power. We need all the solutions. Hydropower, as you mentioned in your interview from Davos. I mean, all these solutions need to be at hand because we need them all. And actually, the biggest hurdle here is not the discussion on what source to use, is the permitting processes. It is right. This very, very concrete hurdle. It takes too much time to get permits to build anything at all. And like we've been repeating so many times in these panels, we don't have that time. So actually, it's not about not having time for that or that source. It's about not having time for these permitting processes. And that goes both for the production and also for the grids, because we need the electrical grids. And at the end of the day, this is a very big issue of democracy and human rights, because this is all about social acceptance. Yep. We didn't have to take these decisions as fast in a previous era because we didn't have to get out of this dependency of fossil fuels so fast, and we weren't facing this electrification that is the answer to how to get out of the fossil fuels. So we need to rebuild also our democratic and bureaucratic processes together to include everyone, and it's about social acceptance at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing those thoughts. And Dan, I know you have reflections on what we've been talking about, and you agree. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts as we close out this panel. But really, will this happen? Can we actually usher in a clean energy future that is equitable?
We can, and the ideas have already been mentioned: accessibility, affordability, acceptability, sustainability. We have to keep in mind that climate change, although it's an existential threat, is only one of the big problems. So it's a matter of political will, and that maybe have to be supplied by the youth. We'll see.
I was expecting a little bit more as a lecturer at Johns Hopkins University, but I love how concise and to the point that was. Appreciate each of you contributing your expertise and your time. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Asa. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Nataliya, my friend. Stay safe. And thank you.
Are we supposed to get up?
Yeah. It is my pleasure to introduce Randy Bell, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center, where Nataliya and I are actually proud Millennium Leadership Fellows. The Atlantic Council promotes constructive leadership and engagement in international affairs based on the Atlantic community's central role in meeting global challenges. Randy oversees the annual Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum in Abu Dhabi. He serves as the co-director of the Atlantic Council's Task Force on U.S. Nuclear Energy Leadership, and he's also the Richard Morningstar Chair for Global Energy Security. Randy, welcome.
Sweta, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I hugely appreciate the invitation, and it's always wonderful to be with you, even if it's just virtually right now. But I have a few remarks prepared, but before I start, I do want to emphasize and agree with what our Swedish colleagues said in the last panel, that there really is no silver bullet, that we need to be looking at all solutions and anything that might address this challenge, because different solutions will be more politically acceptable in different jurisdictions, will be more technologically feasible in different jurisdictions, et cetera. And so I do want to take issue with any argument that says there's one solution over all the others. Not all of them will work, but we need to be open-minded and remember that the problem we're trying to solve is carbon. We're not trying to solve, fossil fuels being the enemy. The enemy is carbon. And so carbon capture, for instance, is going to be, all scenarios suggest will be a crucial part of this system going forward, any decarbonized energy system. So with that, let me begin my remarks. And what I want to talk about is the intersection of climate and energy security, and really thinking about climate and energy security together, and how important that is to think about them together. Everything changed on February 24th with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I hadn't heard the phrase "everything has changed" since right after September 11th. This is a new world we're living in. Things that seemed impossible just days prior were now all of a sudden possible and becoming reality. So Nord Stream 2 was shut down. Finland and Sweden are looking to join NATO. And now we have at least a partial ban on imports of Russian oil into the EU. Now, of course, energy is a huge part of the Russia-Ukraine story, with global and particularly European dependence on Russian energy really limiting the way in which we can act as a global community vis-a-vis Russia. And now, I think it's really important, energy security is back on the global agenda in a way that it hasn't been in years. It's really been missing from the conversation. And it's unfortunate that it's come back in this way, but it's back, and that's probably important if we're going to solve the climate crisis. Now, as discussed in the previous panel, energy security has been at times framed as intention with climate action. So, that climate action and energy security, you can't focus on both problems. You have to focus on one or the other. Now, some of that argumentation is opportunistic and cynical, but some of it is, in fact, sincere and has at least a reasonable analytic backing. So I want to talk about that a little bit and give credit where credit's due, because we want to think through this well to get to the right solution. So just like any energy policy, a bad decarbonization policy can be in conflict with energy security. And the type of policies that focus on simply the elimination of production of fossil fuels without really focusing on providing other types of energy, and I think really, really importantly, without focusing on the demand side, are not going to work. No matter how you feel about the oil and gas industry, leave it in the ground is not good policy for energy security. And frankly, it's not great climate policy either. You really need to be focusing on the consumption of that oil and gas. If you move away from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles, oil and gas demand will go down automatically. That's just how demand and how economics works. So on the flip side, focusing on supply of clean energy and changing the demand, say from gas heating and, as I said, internal combustion engines, is great energy security policy, and it's better climate policy, because instead of focusing on the sort of negative, on shutting down the old economy, it really puts its focus on building the new economy. And that's where I think we're going to be much more successful if we focus on building the new and providing a vision for a future that is even more dynamic and vibrant than the one that we have right now. Now, this sort of big picture think is all fine and good, but in the short term, oil and gas prices are incredibly high. They're driving inflation, potentially causing real economic damage, and this hurts folks on the lower income side of the equation much, much worse than it does high income people. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also limiting our ability to act against Russia. So it's really crucial we act right now. Now, there's some interesting potential tensions here, because as we've seen, the U.S. administration, as well as other governments, have been actively encouraging more oil and gas production from OPEC, from U.S. producers, from others, really trying to get more oil and gas on the market. Now, some observers have called out this as a policy shift and said it's hypocritical, given the focus on climate just a year ago. Now, I think they're wrong. I think it's wrong to call that hypocritical, and here's why. So my colleagues at the Atlantic Council and I have been looking at scenarios for the outcome of the war in Ukraine and the implications for energy. We've come to the conclusion that there are no scenarios in which Russia produces even the same level of oil and gas as it did before the war in any scenario going forward. And I don't mean this in the short term, I mean this as permanent. Even in a scenario where the Putin regime collapses tomorrow and a pro-Western government comes to power and we work to reintegrate Russia into the global economy very, very quickly, and this is an incredibly unlikely scenario, but let's just, we're talking in hypotheticals now. If this were to happen, even if this were to happen, Europe will never again allow itself to have the same dependence on Russian energy that it had on February 23rd. It won't happen. You will have more Russian gas flowing into Europe under this scenario than you would have in a scenario where the war drags on, for sure, but it will not be the same as it was beforehand. Now, what happens to that Russian energy that was otherwise going to be going into Europe? And some of it will find a new home. But for logistical reasons, gas comes through pipelines, a lot of oil is coming through pipelines. Not all of that energy will be able to find a new home, and some of that production will get shut in. This is going to lead to a structural decline in Russian oil and gas production. And it could be pretty significant. And so even in the most rapid decarbonization scenarios, we're not going to be able to decarbonize fast enough to replace that Russian hydrocarbon energy with clean energy in a way that keeps the economy going, in a way that prevents uprisings from folks who are paying for that energy, in a way that really is politically palatable. It's just not doable. And so in order to meet the energy moment, we do need new sources of oil and gas. Particularly, and I want to emphasize this, short cycle plays like from shale, so that you're not making a 30-year investment, you're making maybe a 7-year investment. But we've got to be able to replace at least some of that Russian oil and gas in order to keep our economies going. Now, so to answer those who called the renewed interest in hydrocarbon production hypocritical, I want to say it's absolutely not. It's just quite literally replacing Russian hydrocarbon energy with other energy, other hydrocarbon energy, in a way that allows the economies to keep going, in a way that keeps the energy transition going, and hopefully accelerates the energy transition. We need new sources of oil and gas, but we also need new sources of energy. And I want to end with sort of the positive thinking here, which is, while the crisis is terrible, you never let a crisis go to waste. It is a tremendous opportunity to accelerate the energy transition by even more rapidly deploying clean energy. Perhaps we don't need to replace all of the Russian oil and gas that's come off the market. We can replace it with other sources, and we can invest faster. But even more importantly, and I really want to emphasize this, we can address some of the very short-term issues through a major push on the demand side, through a major push on energy efficiency. And that may be one of the only ways of really getting at the energy security crisis in the short term, is by focusing on energy efficiency. Now, it's really important to note, in the IEA's net zero scenario, there's huge news articles about that scenario and how it called for no new investment in new oil and gas fields. But less noticed in that scenario was its emphasis on energy efficiency. And it noted that in their scenario, the world uses less energy in 2050 than it does today, but it has 2 billion more people, and all those people have greater access to energy. So what you're seeing is just a massive, massive need for energy efficiency. And it really is the unsung hero of climate action. A major effort on energy efficiency right now is probably the fastest and maybe only way to minimize the impact of the current energy crisis. Energy efficiency efforts usually pay off for themselves, And there's no question they would do so in this energy price environment. So we need massive investments in building retrofits, heat pumps instead of gas heating, digitalization of the grid, demand response, even lowering speed limits of cars will make oil consumption lower. And there are many, many other energy efficiency solutions that we need to focus on. So I just want to end noting that going back to the beginning, where we need to act right now on energy security and climate action. These policies, these efforts are not in conflict if we do them right. And working in tandem, the policies work much, much better than if we think of them separately. And I will end with that. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Awesome, Randy. Thank you so much. Thank you for always being such a clear communicator of the global energy landscape. We heard you loud and clear. There's no magic bullet. We really need to work together on this. And thank you for echoing many of the themes that have come up through this segment. So there is an opportunity here, and we will build back, truly build back cleaner and better than anything that we've even experienced before. So appreciate your time. Continue doing the great work you're doing at Atlantic Council. And with that, I would love to welcome our final keynote for this segment. It's my pleasure to introduce Khashayar Farmanbar, the Swedish Minister of Energy and Digital Development. Please join me on the stage. Before becoming a minister, he was oppositional municipal commissioner in Nacka and a member of the Digital Transformation Preparation Committee. So there couldn't be a better person to sign us off for the day. So would love to hear your thoughts. Please begin.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity of being here. I greatly, greatly appreciate the possibility to say some words here. I'm going to introduce with a great change that we are in and the opportunities that it provides. The energy sector is central to solve the climate crisis. According to the International Energy Agency, the energy sector is responsible for almost 3/4 of the total emission that have already pushed the global average temperatures 1.1 degrees Celsius higher since the pre-industrial age, with visible impacts on weather and climate extremes. Therefore, the energy sector must be at the heart of the solutions for the climate change. The crisis for our environment and climate affects people all around the world. The developed countries are the ones who pollute and have polluted the most, but the poorest countries are those who get hit the hardest. We must ensure that no country is left behind, and we must ensure that no person is left behind. The climate transition can only be done if it's made in a social and inclusive way. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has also made it very clear. Fossil fuel dependency is not only a climate risk, but also a security risk. Sweden condemns, of course, in the strongest possible terms, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The war highlights the necessity to accelerate the clean energy transition and rapidly phase out dependency of fossil fuels from Russia. Russia is currently the third largest producer of oil globally and the largest exporter. Around 60% of oil exports go to the European Union countries. During this week, the European Council, the sixth package of sanctions, discussed the sixth package of sanctions against Russia. And Sweden supports the inclusion of sanctions against crude oil as well as petroleum products delivered from Russia to European Union member states. The EU is also very dependent on Russia for natural gas, and gas from Russia accounted for about 45% of EU gas imports in 2021, and almost 40% of EU total gas consumption. It is clear that the current geopolitical situation may lead to supply disruptions with serious negative impacts on the EU energy supply, with certain member states being hit hard. Therefore, we need to closely monitor and develop, share information, and discuss potential actions in the short, medium, and long term. Our current evaluation is that there is no immediate risk regarding gas or energy supplies in Sweden, but we foresee continued high energy prices, the European gas situation may have a significant effect on the Swedish gas and electricity market in the coming winter. Beyond this immediate situation, I would like to once again underline the need to intensify the phasing out of fossil fuels. This will improve European security of supplies and also allow us to reach the common climate goals. All domestic fossil-free energy sources, including wind, nuclear, bioenergy, should be able to contribute, and we need to speed up that process. For Sweden, the clean energy transition is a key priority. We are well on our way, I might say, but we still have a lot to do, mainly in the transport sector and in the industry sector, and to meet the increased demand for electricity. Sweden's electricity production is almost completely fossil-free, as you've heard during the panels earlier today. However, 2/3 of Sweden's greenhouse gas emissions come from transport and the industry sectors. And now they are switching from fossil to electricity. The electrification of our cars is now taking place at a faster rate than anybody expected. The industry is changing at a furious pace. Now, we need to secure this ongoing development and increase the pace. Let me give you an example. LKAB, the Swedish mining company, calculates that their future export of fossil-free iron fungus can reduce emissions in other countries corresponding to 2/3 of Sweden's total emissions. Passenger cars are being electrified at a rapid pace. Today, more rechargeable cars are sold than petrol and diesel cars combined in Sweden. We are leading the league when it comes to new sales of electric cars or plug-in hybrids in the European Union. This is a development we need to secure and accelerate. The Swedish government recently adopted a national electrification strategy, which will be an important framework for our work in Sweden during the next 3 years. It includes 67 different actions in 12 different areas. Electrification is also a key to the labor market of the future. The development also provides growing industries, growing societies, more jobs and in businesses, better welfare, more service industry, and increased tax revenues. The jobs many are without today will be able to be created in this future. We will be able to develop more internationally successful industries in Sweden thanks to this process. There was a time, and I'm sure you all know about this and recognize this. There was a time when some would say that we need to get rid of our industry and growth in order to meet the climate challenges. They were wrong. And there were others, unfortunately some of them are still heard today. They would say that you are exaggerating the climate challenges. We cannot let our climate ambitions hinder the growth of our economics. They were wrong, and they are dead wrong today. Sweden and our ongoing green transition, the green industrial revolution that we're seeing in all over Sweden, is showing the way. We are the living proof that growth, welfare, and social ambitions can and arguably must go hand in hand with the green transition. When Sweden and companies in Sweden are forerunners, it also means the export of climate-smart products and new technology solutions that can greatly reduce emissions in other countries. In Sweden, the electricity use has been more or less constant for the past 30 years, but the amount of energy that today comes from fossil fuels will come from green electricity. Therefore, we see a large increase in electricity demand by 2045. We are now greatly strengthening our electricity grid throughout the country through triple investments in the main grid over the next years. This is a comprehensive challenge which requires everything from shortening permitting times that we've heard earlier and creating acceptance for new electricity production, educating more people to work in this industry, and also having better public acceptance for this process. So to conclude, we see that this green transition is essential for, one, creating well-paying jobs for people all over the country, or arguably all over the world. It's good and it's essential for helping us to reach our climate goals so that our planet remains hospitable for the humankind even in the future. And third, it is how we see the green transition is essential for creating energy security and reduce our dependency from energy imports. So I would invite you all to come and join this green industrial revolution, and let's together work on creating a better world. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Khashayar. Thank you for those words. You know, through this segment, we've been talking about a crisis that's devastating, and we're all paying witness to it. And we've also been talking about the optimism that is in the room, and more broadly through the networks that we all have and that we're working in. We really feel that we can actually overcome what's happening in Ukraine, and we can transition to clean energy. And you are as optimistic as they come. You're really positive, and you're leading the charge in Sweden. So my question to you, even though I think I already have an idea of how you're going to respond, are we going to overcome this crisis? Are we going to be able to usher in a clean energy future? Will the rest of the countries follow suit, follow the great goals that Sweden has set for itself and that it looks like it's reaching?
I would say we must. So therefore, my answer is yes, we will be able to make it. But it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. We need to work hard with public acceptance. If we're going to get rid of the fossil fuels and instead have green electricity, then we're going to see some more windmills around the countries. We're going to see more wind turbines in the sea. We're going to see more energy production, solar panels on buildings. That is one of the things that we have to accept. That's the way we're going to move forward. We're going to use more storage of electricity through green hydrogen or green methanol or batteries or other solutions. And we need to be technology positive on the solutions that we see ahead of us. That's one of the ways that we need to walk in order to, or to run actually, in order to make this. And I'm sure that, I'm very confident that we will make it, but hey, I'm an optimist.
Well, your confidence and your optimism is very infectious, and I mean that in the most positive of ways. So thank you. Please continue doing what you're doing. Continue to lead, and let Sweden be the example for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am going to ask my colleagues to join me up on stage, Ingmar and Patrick. And as they do that, I will just say we're back tomorrow with another broadcast where we'll focus on how to maximize climate impact with digitization. And this broadcast will be part of the Exponential Climate Action Summit 6 with 1.5 degrees Celsius aligned frontrunners like Ericsson, Google, BT Group, Netflix, and so many others. So we'll be back. But before we close for the day, what do you think? How did today go? What are your reflections?
What a day. I have some reflection about the content we had just now, and I think regarding the energy issue, it's so clear. We really heard we don't have time mentioned a lot of times, because that is what we really need to focus on. In Sweden, we had this crazy debate about that nuclear is kind of the solution to the energy crisis. I mean, nuclear is, we need to have two things in mind here. We have the existing nuclear, and we have the idea to build new nuclear that takes 10, 20 years' time. That's maybe a good thing, but it will not solve the energy crisis because we need to do it now. So we need to have all the solutions that we have in the toolbox now. And I don't see this debate from both sides. They are either against or pro-nuclear. I'm pro-time, and against everything that takes too long time. We really need to have that in mind. Another thing is, I mean, it's great to hear people speak about how good Sweden are. I'm Swedish, but I also know a lot of information, and sometimes it is not so good. And we need to address this. Sweden is doing more. They're doing good and bad things. But regarding the energy politics, Sweden handling the energy crisis by lowering the tax on fossil fuel. That's not how we get rid of fossil fuel. We are increasing the fossil fuel subsidies. If you own a car in Sweden, you get $100 just by owning the car last month.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's electric or non-electric, you just get $100. If you don't own a car, you get nothing. So buy a car and the government will give you money. That's a subsidy.
Yeah.
Another subsidy is if you have a high electric bill. I don't have a high electric bill because I have solar panels on my roof. I have invested in that. I have invested in a lot of other technology to lower my energy consumption. So I actually produce more energy when I consume. But most people don't do that. So what the government are doing here in Sweden, I'm not talking about the previous government, I'm talking about this government. They are giving all the consumers that have a high electric bill some helicopter money. This is madness. This is not leadership. I don't say that Sweden are doing everything bad, but we have room for improvements because we don't have time.
Let Sweden be the model, except for those examples and anything else that isn't always brought to light that we don't want to see scaled, actually. But the positives that Sweden is doing, let's really see those solutions scaled throughout the world, because we have to urgently move in the direction towards bringing in clean energy.
We also need to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And that is, we can't transform the society without sacrificing things. Everyone loves change if they don't need to change. That's bullshit. We must change, and the only way to change is to do something that hurts when we're changing, but in the end, it will be much better. That is the story political leaders need to sell. And today, many political leaders, they are selling the story they think someone will like to hear. That's not leadership. Leadership is to sell something that people must hear, not something they want to hear. That's a big thing. So I think we need to tell the truth here and be a little bit honest about.
Well, never stop speaking the truth.
Leadership is about telling people that we need to do things that will be very uncomfortable when we're doing it. But in the end, we're going to create a lot better future. And Sweden is doing a lot of good things for that too. So that's why we have this review system, where we could give Sweden climate love for all the good stuff that we also heard the minister talk about here. I love that. That deserves love. And we could give some climate warning to those crazy subsidies and other things that we shouldn't be doing.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Ingmar. Patrick, your reflections for today.
Maybe I might lack words to say. Have seen a lot of speakers, activists, the governments who are here in Stockholm speaking regarding our planet. Already I can feel they can see our planet is crying. Already they can hear the cry of our planet. Already they can feel the pain our planet is having. So I wouldn't like maybe we have another Stockholm at 100. We are lucky there was 1972 Stockholm, which we are celebrating today. So, walk the talk. I think that's all we need. We might be leaders from Africa, from America, from all corners of the world who have gathered here for one voice. Let's be that voice. And we don't have time to say, together we are the solution. I believe whoever came wherever he have came up to here, he is here for that togetherness. So be that voice. That's all I can say. A lot of speakers have said so much today, activists, youths, our mothers from different villages from all over the world. Now it's that time to take that bold action, and collectively, I think we can win this battle. So wherever you are, our leaders, let's act. If we not act, let's remember nature is unforgiving. We don't want to be extinct, or our children's or generations to come. So let's combine together, let's combine efforts, let's act and walk the walk. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Thank you, gentlemen, for closing out today with me. We are coming back tomorrow. We have an exciting program and lineup, so please tune in to all of the viewers around the world that have been with us today. Thank you. You are part of the solution, and together we will overcome the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.